You know, most legends, they get bigger over time, right? The stories get exaggerated. But the story we're about to get into, it's the complete opposite. It's a story that had to be toned down just so people would believe it. This is the story of Simon Kenton. So we're not going to start at the beginning. No, we're jumping right into what should have been the very end.
Just try to imagine this. You are tied, and I mean tightly, to a wooden stake. Your body's been painted completely black. That's the Shawnee sign for a ritual execution. All around you, in a circle, are 200 warriors, and their faces are just glowing from the fire they're about to use on you.
And this number, this is why you're here. 7. It's the number of times you have already survived the gauntlet. 7 separate, brutal runs between two lines of men trying to beat you to death. Nobody survives that, but you did. And now, this fire is supposed to be your reward.
Just as the torches are coming forward, a figure steps out of the smoke. It's Simon Girty, a renegade, a traitor who defected to the British and their Shawnee allies. He is the absolute last person on Earth you'd expect to be your savior. Which brings up the real questions. Who is this man tied to the stake, and how in the world did he get here?
To really get what's happening at that fire, we've got to rewind. We have to see how a teenage runaway basically transformed himself into one of the most incredible figures on the American frontier. Kenton's story really kicks off in 1771. He's just 16, gets into a fight over a woman, and he thinks he's killed the guy. So he bolts. He runs into the wilderness to escape the hangman, changes his name to Simon Butler, and just vanishes. But within a few years, this fugitive becomes this elite scout and a close friend to the legendary Daniel Boone. He even saves his life.
And here's the absolute kicker, the irony that shaped his entire life. The man he thought he'd murdered back in Virginia. He was totally fine. He survived. So Kenton spent years as a man on the run, building a whole new life in the most dangerous place imaginable, all based on a total mistake.
But that life on the run forged him into something extraordinary. He wasn't just surviving out there, he was mastering the wilderness. He was known everywhere as the fastest man on the frontier, a crack shot with a rifle, and he had what people could only describe as an uncanny wood sense. Seriously, people who knew him swore he could track game in total darkness and could literally smell an ambush before it happened. But even with all those skills, you can't outrun your luck forever. In 1778, while he was on a raid to steal Shawnee horses, Kenton got captured. His punishment was going to be the ultimate test of endurance, the gauntlet.
So what exactly is the gauntlet? Well, think of it as a form of ritual punishment. A captive has to run a long lane between two rows of warriors, and they are armed with everything from clubs to tomahawks. If you fall, you were usually killed right on the spot. To survive even one run was considered a miracle.
The sheer impossibility of what this man went through is just hard to wrap your head around. His first run was nearly fatal. The second one crushed his ribs. The third fractured his skull. And they didn't just do it in one place. They marched him from village to village, forcing him to run again and again. By the 7th run, he was a broken mess of a man, barely conscious, but somehow, he was still on his feet.
So after he survived the unsurvivable, the Shawnee leaders basically decided, okay, enough is enough. His resilience was almost an insult. So they decided they would end him with fire. They painted him black and marched him to their main town of Chillicothe for his final execution.
And this brings us right back to where we started. Kenton's tied to the stake, surrounded by warriors, with all hope completely gone. And that's the moment the most hated man on the frontier steps out of the smoke.
I mean, the irony here is just staggering. On one side, you've got Simon Kenton, a respected hero of the American frontier. On the other, Simon Girty, a man universally despised by the Americans as a traitor who fought alongside the Shawnee. And yet, these two guys, they had once been friends, scouts together in the early days.
Girty pushes through the crowd, looks at the black and beaten face of the man about to be burned, and he shouts his old name, Simon Butler. He reportedly just broke down in tears, embraced his old friend, and then turned to the Shawnee chiefs. He launched into this passionate plea, reminding them of their shared battles and begging them to spare this one man's life for his sake.
And in a twist no one could have possibly predicted, they listened. The council agreed to spare Kenton. He was untied and, following a respected Shawnee custom, was adopted by a widow to replace a lost son or husband.
The man who entered the village as a condemned enemy was now, suddenly, a member of the tribe.
Kenton would eventually escape, but his story was far from over. He would go from being a legendary survivor to a foundational figure in the creation of a new state, only to have history pretty much pass him by.
After getting back to American territory, Kenton's unparalleled knowledge of the land made him absolutely indispensable. He guided thousands of settlers into what would become Ohio, he surveyed the very ground for new towns, and he served his country again as a brigadier general in the War of 1812. This guy was instrumental in opening the West.
One of the most famous stories about him involves the great Shawnee leader Tecumseh. Legend says that after Tecumseh was killed, Kenton identified the body and then intentionally misidentified it to stop soldiers from mutilating it. It's a great story, but the evidence for it is pretty low. It was likely a tale that got added on later to enhance his legend as a man who was honorable even to his enemies.
But this is what leads to the great tragedy of Simon Kenton's life. For all his service, he had claims to thousands of acres of land, and yet, through a combination of confusing laws, corrupt lawyers, and forged documents, he was cheated out of pretty much all of it.
The man who had faced down death countless times, who had saved Daniel Boone and helped build Ohio, died with almost nothing to his name in 1836. He was buried in an unmarked pauper's grave, a forgotten hero. It was only decades later that his body was finally moved and reburied with the honors he deserved. And this quote just perfectly captures the heartbreaking irony of his legacy. He was the key that unlocked the Ohio Valley for a new nation, guiding countless families to their future homes and their fortunes, but he was ultimately left outside.
It just leaves you with this powerful question. How can someone live a life that seems almost too incredible for fiction, a man whose actions directly shape the states of Kentucky and Ohio, and still end up as little more than a footnote? It makes you wonder what other legends we've forgotten.